Good evening, my friends. Let me begin tonight with a question. What if the life you have been praying for, working toward, and waiting on already exists? Not someday, not when you are ready, not after you have done enough or suffered enough or earned it. Right now, this very moment. Most people live as though reality is something that happens to them. They look at their bank account, their relationships, their health, and they call that the truth. They let what they can see with their physical eyes determine what they believe is possible. And in doing so, they lock themselves inside a prison they built with their own imagination. But Neville Goddard taught something that shook the foundations of conventional thinking. He said that the world you see around you is not the cause of your experience, it is the effect. It is the outer picture of an inner assumption. And if that is true, if your imagination is actually the only creative force in your life, then the reality you want does not need to be created. It only needs to be claimed. Tonight, I want you to understand this not as a philosophy, not as a comfort, but as a law, as certain and as reliable as gravity. The reality you want exists right now, and by the end of tonight, you will know exactly why that is true, and exactly what is standing between you and it. Let me tell you something that most people never stop to consider. The life you want is not waiting to be built. It is not waiting for the right circumstances, the right timing, or the right version of you to finally show up. It already exists. Right now, as fully and completely as the life you are living in this moment. Neville taught that consciousness is the only reality. And within that infinite consciousness, every possible version of your life exists simultaneously, not as a metaphor, not as a poetic idea to make you feel better on a difficult evening, as an actual fact about the nature of reality itself. Think of it this way. You are standing in a vast dark room. The room contains everything. Every version of your life, the one where you are healthy, the one where you are loved, the one where you are free, the one where you have already become who you were always meant to be. All of it exists in that room right now. The only question is where you point the light. Your attention is that light. Where you place your awareness, what you assume to be true about yourself and your life, determines which version of reality begins to solidify around you. You are not creating something new. You are selecting something that already is. This is well said so plainly and so powerfully that imagining creates reality, not that imagining helps reality along. Not that imagining improves your attitude so you work harder and attract better luck. He meant it literally. The act of imagining, of mentally inhabiting a state, is the act of moving through consciousness toward a reality that already exists and is waiting to receive you. Now, here is where most people stumble. They hear this and they think it means the external world is somehow fake or unimportant. That is not what this teaching says. The world you see is real. But it is real in the same way that last night's dream was real while you were in it. It is a projection, a faithful, precise projection of your inner state. And if that projection is not showing you what you want, the answer is not to fight the projection. The answer is to change what is being projected. You cannot rearrange the screen and change the film. You have to go back to the source. The version of you that is already living your desired reality, that version exists right now. The only distance between you and that life is the distance between your current assumption and the assumption that version of you is already living. That distance is not measured in years. It is not measured in effort. It is measured only in consciousness. And consciousness can shift in an instant. Most people believe they are choosing their reality with their desires. They are not. They are choosing it with their assumptions. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. A desire is what you want. An assumption is what you believe is actually true. And the universe, if we can call it that, does not respond to what you want. It responds with perfect and merciless precision to what you assume. You can want abundance your entire life. But if somewhere beneath that wanting, there is a quiet, settled belief that money is hard to come by, that people like you don't really break through, that good things always seem to fall apart just before they arrive, then that assumption will win every time. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the universe is consistent. It will always reflect your deepest held inner state back to you. Neville called this the law of assumption. And he was not speaking about positive thinking. He was not asking you to paste affirmations on your mirror and hope for the best. He was pointing to something far deeper, something that most people never examine because it lives below the level of conscious thought. Your assumptions are not the things you tell yourself. They are the things you never question. The assumption that struggle is normal. The assumption that love is complicated. The assumption that your past determines your future. The assumption that you are the kind of person who almost makes it but never quite does. These are not thoughts you consciously choose. They are positions you have settled into. And because they feel like facts, You never think to challenge them. But here is what Neville understood so clearly. An assumption, no matter how long you have held it, is not a fact. It is a habit of consciousness, and habits can be changed. The moment you catch an assumption, truly catch it, see it for what it is, a chosen position and not an eternal truth, you have already begun to loosen its grip. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to spend years unraveling where it came from. You simply need to replace it with the assumption that belongs to the life you want to live. Assume you are already the person you want to become. Assume the outcome is already settled. Assume the love, the health, the freedom is already yours. Not as a wish, but as a present inner fact. Your outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself around that new assumption. Because the world has never been responding to your circumstances. It has only ever been responding to you. We have been taught to treat imagination as a lesser faculty, something children do before they learn better, something dreamers indulge in before the real world corrects them. We were handed this idea early that imagination is the opposite of reality, that the serious work of life happens out there in the physical world through effort and strategy and persistence. Neville spent his entire life dismantling that belief. He did not say imagination was a tool to help you cope. He did not say it was a way to stay motivated while you waited for real results. He said imagination is the only creative force in existence. He said it with the quiet certainty of a man who had tested it, lived it, and watched it work in ways that defied every conventional explanation. And what he meant was this: before anything exists in the physical world, it must first exist in consciousness. Every building you have ever walked into began as an image in someone's mind. Every relationship, every discovery, every shift in the course of a human life, it was imagined first. Not planned, not strategized, imagined, felt, inhabited inwardly before it ever appeared outwardly. This is not a motivational observation. It is a description of how reality actually works. The physical world is not the starting point. It is the end point. It is where imagination lands after it has been held with enough clarity and feeling to take form. What you see around you right now is simply yesterday's imagination made solid. And what you imagine today with genuine feeling, with real inner conviction, is tomorrow's physical reality in the process of forming. This is why Neville said that to imagine is the most serious thing a human being can do. Not prayer in the conventional sense, not ritual, not discipline, though discipline has its place. Imagination, vivid, deliberate, feeling soaked imagination. And yet, most people use this extraordinary power carelessly. They spend their days imagining what they fear, rehearsing conversations that went wrong, replaying losses, reliving rejections that haven't even happened yet. And then they wonder why life feels like it is working against them. It is not working against them. It is working for them, perfectly, obediently, without judgment, giving form to exactly what they have been most consistently imagining. The invitation Neville extended was not complicated. Stop treating imagination as fantasy. Start treating it as the workshop where your reality is built. Because what you imagine with feeling is not a wish sent into the void. It is an instruction that the universe has already begun to carry out. There is a moment, a specific internal moment where everything changes. Not when the job offer arrives. Not when the relationship finally turns. Not when the money appears in your account or the doctor gives you good news. Those are the echoes. The moment that actually matters happens long before any of that. It happens inside you, in the quiet. When you make a decision that the reality you want is not coming, it is already here. Neville called this living in the end. And it is perhaps the most misunderstood idea in all of his teaching. People here live in the end and they think it means pretend, act as if, force a smile and repeat phrases you don't believe. That is not what he meant. What he meant was far more subtle and far more powerful than that. He meant that every state of reality has a feeling. The person who is loved feels a certain way walking through their day. The person who is financially free carries a particular inner posture. The person who is healthy, who is confident, who has already become what they set out to become, they have an inner atmosphere, a texture of consciousness that is entirely their own. And Neville's instruction was simple. Find that feeling, not the feeling of wanting it, not the feeling of hoping it will come, the feeling of already having it, the quiet satisfaction, the inner settledness, the sense that it is done. This is what he meant by occupying the wish fulfilled. You do not occupy it by performing it for the world. You occupy it in the stillness of your own mind. In the moments before sleep, when the conscious guard drops and the deeper mind is open. In the brief, honest space where you allow yourself to feel, truly feel what it would be like if your desire were already a fact. That feeling is not a trick. It is not self-deception. It is you placing yourself consciously and deliberately into the state that corresponds to the reality you have chosen. And the law is exact. The outer world must in time conform to the inner state you have genuinely occupied. The difficulty is not in the technique, the difficulty is in the honesty it requires. You cannot half occupy a state, you cannot feel the wish fulfilled while simultaneously believing it is still far away. You have to choose. And that choosing is an act of real psychological courage. But when you do it, when you truly settle into the feeling of the thing already being real, something shifts, not outside, not yet, inside. A kind of quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself. That inner shift is the moment of creation. Everything that follows is simply the world catching up. Here is the part that no one talks about enough. The law works. It works consistently, quietly, and without exception. But between the moment you plant the seed inwardly and the moment it appears outwardly, there is a gap. And what happens inside that gap determines everything. Most people do not fail because the law failed them. They failed because they could not hold their inner state long enough for the law to complete its work. They imagined clearly. They felt it genuinely. For a day, perhaps a week, perhaps even a month, they carried that inner conviction and it felt real and alive. And then nothing. No sign, no movement, no evidence that anything had shifted. And in that silence, doubt crept in, quietly at first. A whisper that said, maybe this doesn't work, maybe not for me, maybe I was fooling myself. And the moment they believed that whisper, they stepped out of the state. They abandoned the assumption. And the bridge that was already being built, the circumstances that were already being arranged, the people and events that were already moving toward them, all of it began to dissolve. Not because the law stopped working, but because they stopped holding the inner cause in place. Neville called what happens in that gap the bridge of incidence. And it is one of the most important ideas he ever shared. He said, you do not need to know how your desire will manifest. You do not need to see the path. You do not need to figure out the steps or engineer the outcome or understand the mechanics of how the invisible becomes visible. That is not your work. Your work is to hold the inner state, to persist in the assumption, to remain faithful to the reality you have chosen, even when, especially when, the outer world shows you nothing. The bridge of incidence is the universe arranging the how. It will use people you know, people you haven't met yet, events that seem like coincidences, doors that open without explanation. It will construct a path between where you are and where you have already placed yourself in consciousness. But it can only do that if you stay in the state long enough for it to complete its construction. Persistence is not stubbornness. It is not white knuckling your way through doubt. True persistence is a deep, settled, almost effortless certainty that what you have imagined is already real, and that the physical evidence is simply a matter of time. This is the quality that separates those who see the law work from those who conclude it doesn't. Not talent, not worthiness, not the size of the desire or the complexity of the circumstances. Only this, the willingness to remain certain before there is anything to be certain about. That certainty is not blind faith. It is the highest form of knowing there is.